brand new week. Welcome to 55 Minutes of Business. Is normally what we do on Business Incorporated. And for this Monday episode, here's what we have prepared for you. We'll give you updates and conversations around that proposed hardship protest in Nigeria. Ethiopia begins a new FX regime. They are now floating the birr. We'll see the consequences. And if you're interested in investing in Kenya, 2 infrastructural bonds are now open. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ini John Mekwa. Let's head into the business world. Oil prices rose on Monday, pairing last week's loss on fears of widening conflict in the Middle East following a rocket strike in the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights, which Israel and the United States blamed on Lebanese armed group Hezbollah. Brent crude futures gained 20 cents, that's about 0.3%, to $81.33 a barrel, while U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures also gained 9 cents, that's about 0.1%, to $77.25 a barrel. Last week, Brent lost 1.8%, while WTI fell 3.7% on sagging Chinese demand and hopes of a Gaza ceasefire agreement. On Sunday, Israel's Security Cabinet authorized Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government to decide on the manner and timing of a response to Saturday's rocket strike in Golan Heights that killed 12 teenagers and children. Still in the global space, gold prices rose 1% as the U.S. Treasury yields fell on optimism for an interest rate cut by the Federal Reserve in September after data showed U.S. prices rose modestly in June. Spot gold went up 1% right there to $2,388.05 per ounce after hitting its lowest since July 9 on Thursday. U.S. gold futures for August delivery settled 1.2% higher at $2,381. And then we come to Nigeria, where one of the hottest topic at this time is the planned protest, to talk against what a lot of people have called bad governance in the country, as well as hardship because of the economic indices and bad governance protest. That's what it's called, hashtag that. Now, telecommunication companies, as the telcos in Nigeria, have denied plans to frustrate the hashtag End Bad Governance protest, which is slated for August the 1st to the 10th, the 15th across the country. They said that the social and economic contract that they've signed to provide services at all times would not allow them to do so. The denial is amid an allegation by a legal luminary, Mr. Ebolu Adigboruwa, a senior advocate of Nigeria, that telecommunication companies, telcos in the country, were trying to frustrate the planned protest. And I dare say that if you look around you, you would see a lot of people who say they have been disconnected, even right here in our offices. So perhaps that is why Mr. Adigboruwa brought that up, and it's now up to the telcos to sort out some of these challenges. Now, still on the protest, as Nigeria braces for proposed hardship protest, stakeholders in the oil and gas industry have identified issues driving up petroleum product prices. As you would see, there are queues in many filling stations around the country. According to Publicity Secretary of Crude Oil Refiners Association of Nigeria, Mr. Eche Idoko, the Nigerian government must put forward Nigeria First policies to help reduce pressure on disposable income. He made this comment on Business Morning earlier today.
Koran has been championing the cause to push for domestic refining, and truth be told, we have in our own stride with very little input from the government, been able to get refineries running. As we speak, we have about six of such refineries, 100% privately owned, running in Nigeria. And we have to do these things to stem the tide of things like this. Let's try to get products to the Nigerian market at a relatively affordable rate. The Americans always say America first. Would say in formulating policies that governs the oil and gas sector, make Nigeria first. Let the interest of Nigerians and Nigeria be first above the merchants that trade with us. When you're making policies, let policies be such that would grow the domestic Nigerian oil and gas industry before we begin to look at what happens globally.
Yeah, you would remember we tried to have that conversation with Mr. Idoko on Thursday, but there was a network issue, and so we're glad we're able to get him in the studio this morning to react to some of those burning issues. Now, still staying on the planned protest, we're going to discuss now with former member of the Nigerian House of Representatives, Ms. Nkoyo Toyo. Perhaps she has some ideas if these can still be averted. I know if you watch our sister program, Sunday Politics, yesterday, you would see that conversation with one of the organizers of the protest saying they are determined to hold it. But I mean, when we look at the past, especially not so long ago, the NSAS protest and what it turned out to be, properties, lives, and all of that. But of course, on the other hand, there's also the cost of not protesting, of not speaking up in the midst of what the economic hardship which people are going through. And of course, people do have the right to protest. Now, let's find out the stance of Ms. Nkoyo Toyo, joins us from France. Ms. Toyo, thank you so much for your time. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So what are you? Yeah, good. So what are your thoughts on this protest? I mean, when we look at the macroeconomic indices, it's obvious that people are not as happy, and you wouldn't blame them. People are still queuing up for petrol, which they pay for at very high price. The price of basics that are being consumed have really skyrocketed more than 100% in some cases. And so people want to speak out. But on the other hand, we see the cost of these protests that it could have on the economy, on economic activities, standstill. The fear of it being hijacked is also another one. What do you see? What's your perspective on this issue?
Sadly, we are in a very unfortunate situation. Either way, we are going to face different consequences, whether that is against the people and against the infrastructure and destruction of property. We're still going to see consequences, whether it is one in which the people do not say anything at all and have to live with the consequences of the policies which they are currently facing, similar to the one that you just highlighted, the situation with fuel in the country. Whichever way you look at it, there are going to be consequences. And I believe that that's the sad situation in which we find ourselves today. Obviously, you will agree that the cost of living has become extremely exorbitant, way above the income and earnings of most Nigerians. And even if you ignore it, on the 1st of August, it will continue to be there. Question is, what do we do to stop this? What do we do to even give people a sense of hope and a sense of we can do something about this, this can be changed? Because I think that's what the message I hear people trying to convey. Back in 2023, we had come up with something called the Civil Society Labor Forum, Front, which is basically our attempt at trying to collaborate with the labor unions. Were very unhappy about the situation with the minimum wage and other salary-related issues, and we felt that it wasn't something we should have left to the civil society, to the labor alone. That the wider society had issues to address. I think back in the time there was huge opportunity for us to negotiate and discuss. Dialogues per se are not what we need now. We need dialogues and we need negotiations. We need trust, because people need to begin to hear the language of policy is not against them, policy is for them. I think what people are hearing is a message that says the policies are working against them, and absolutely there is no solution. So I agree with you absolutely that we're in a very difficult situation right now. And either way you look at it, the country has to face certain consequences. And we pray for consequences that are less painful, but at the end of it all, consequences are what we need to face. And I believe there's a lot that can be done. And one of the things that we need to do is to move away from looking at this as political and beginning to look at it more from the people's perspective as hardship. What does hardship mean? How do people deal with hardship? If there's no amount of politics you blame on other people that will take away the hardship. The hardship remains the hardship. So how does the country begin to address the question of hardship so that hardship becomes the mainstream of what we are doing? Right now we are here, the country could not have survived. All the parties wanted to do away with the subsidies. All that is agreed. Now we are faced with the consequences of what we have done, the decisions and policies we've taken. How do we go about addressing the dire consequences that have emerged from some of those decisions? And I think the missing discussion now and the channel for those discussions is how do you make me or an ordinary citizen of Nigeria believe that whatever is being done will be in its best interest. I mean, some people have argued that 4, 5, 6, 10 years from now, Nigeria will be in a much better place. We don't know. It could be so. But people have to deal with the current situation in which they find themselves. And that's the reality on the ground. I can return to talk about some of the things that need to be done.
Yes. So I hear you say two things. I mean, they just pop out from what you have said. The first is trust, and then the other is dialogue. Now, if you tell us how you think this can be done, because when you talk about dialogue, all through last week, we did hear the president was meeting with traditional rulers, he was meeting with ministers, SGF had a meeting representing the president, so these are dialogues, but it seems not to have calm nerves, even up till now.
Okay, so I in particular, I used to facilitate something called the Niger Delta Dialogues under President Buhari in 2016, and a couple of us came together. You see, the dialogue has to be with the affected. The dialogue has to be with the people who have the power to change and rediscuss the direction of things. Right now, when a traditional ruler and the government sits to discuss, they're not necessarily the ones who are being impacted upon. They're the ones who are the gatekeepers, oftentimes, in terms of what happens in society. So we need to have direct discussions. And I just want to take you back to what we did. If you remember back in 2016, there was almost a close down of all the oil installations in Nigeria. They were blowing them up. The production levels fell significantly to less than 1 million barrels per day. And the country was in a very difficult economic situation because we weren't getting the kinds of resources we were looking forward to run the country. And what we did as the Niger Delta and PANDEF, under the leadership of Chief Ike Clark and a host of other leaders from the community, was to reach out to the agitators. And that was a direct conversation. And this led to discussions between the ministries or petroleum directly. Several dialogues were held. And I need to add that dialogues do not end the problem. You must negotiate. Trust means that I don't believe in you. So then I come to the table to dialogue with you. I want to hear what you're giving me. So there must be some bargain. There must be some negotiation. There must be some conversation as to what we take away. So, look at what's been happening with minimum wage, for example. That one is a clear, direct case of unionization and negotiations. And yet we've waited a year and how many months now, we still haven't seen any progress or significant progress in that regard. So the point in question is that trust deficit has a huge implication. I think the breakaway from the union and the laborers in terms of how they negotiated that process has also given a reason for the rest of the country to feel, well, if labor has now gotten what it wants, what about the rest of us? So there is room for a lot more of these discussions and negotiations. And my sense of this is that the federal government has made a serious move towards local government autonomy. These conversations need to happen at the level where people are actually hurting. If you think about it, palliatives were sent to states, but absolutely all the stories around it suggest that palliative is not working. The first ministry to be struck by any form of scandal is the palliative ministry. And up till now, we have a suspended minister. We don't know what the outcome of that is, whether she's returning or she's still remaining out of this ministry, or what exactly is the status of the whole thing, and who is even managing that whole process right now. So there are a lot of gray areas that I think we need to see more structure to it. And secondly, we need to realize that the strategies of the past, palliatives in particular, are not working. The Nigerian system has now taken over palliative, and it's making palliative look like it is actually a problem rather than a solution. We need to come up with more grassroots-driven, grassroots-based, more direct interactions with the communities. And I think that, yes, at some point the president did engage the governors, but there's need for so much more to happen in terms of reaching out. And let me add quickly in here that I think we haven't even started having a proper conversation on the hardship issues. As we speak, farmers in the north are complaining about the scarcity of rain, which is where most of the food is grown, which means that we're likely to see some elements of drought if the rainfall does not improve. Therefore, even the food insecurity that we are already facing will be complicated by the fact that we do not have enough to feed the citizens. The cost of it, inflation and everything is just a fraction of the problem. So we're not addressing solutions to the problem. We're addressing what we will call placating the problem. And this placating of the problem is not actually touching the citizens directly. The citizens are not made to feel that this is about them. It's still about, oh, we had to take out subsidy. Oh, it's the fault of Buhari. He didn't run the country well. Oh, the PDP messed up the country previously. Oh, the salvation has come. What do we understand this to mean in practical terms? So my comments would be that we need to have a more deeper understanding. It seems to me that the discussions that are happening are cross-purpose. It's not directed at the real problem. The root problem is that people have no food to eat. They are hungry. They're in need of food they can afford and buy. The food that is available is too expensive for most of the citizens to buy.
All right, Ms.
We need to do something about
All
that.
right. Yeah, thank you so much. And I think at the end of the day, what you're proposing is dialogue with the people who are directly involved and affected. Former member of the Nigerian House of Representatives, Ms. Koyo Toyo, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, too.
Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll head to the market and other conversations await you. It's Business Incorporated on Channels Television. Of course, the planned protest is still the biggest news in Nigeria, and we'll get back to that conversation. But now let's get to the market and see intraday numbers, see how the market and investors are faring amidst this uncertainty. We cannot emphasize enough about the uncertainty that this brings to the not just the business, even for, we're trying to attract foreigners, but even for domestic investors. This brings a lot of fear. For the real sector, this brings a lot of uncertainty to
speaking of uncertainty, we're just if the protest goes as planned, peaceful protest, well, an investor, an analyst I was speaking to says there would not be any impact, like significant impact on the markets. Everything will go as normal, as usual, business as usual. But if the protest is hijacked and there's violence, it degenerates to violence, which is the fear of many. Yes. So this is when we have that market disruption. That's why we have the markets being, closed down, and we see that losses in naira and billions of naira and millions of dollars being lost because of this.
Yeah, just the uncertainty alone.
It's just causing a lot of...
Would it not happen?
It's quite chaotic in the air, just thinking about it.
It is. And this is a fragile economy. We have to note that, you know. And then adding this to that, obviously, it's not a positive one at all.
We just hope that the government does listen to the people.
Yeah, we hope like dialogue, as the last guest said, will prevail.
Instead of going, I don't even want a protest to degenerate, but I do want the government to listen to the people. The people are hungry, the people are starving, and they just need us, the government, to listen to them and act on their, their promises.
Yeah.
So let's just look at the markets and see how major stocks were performed at intraday in Africa. We see sentiments were mostly negative. We just hope that the planned protest is not creeping in already. But Nigeria's NGX was trading down by 0.02%. This is just bringing, we've seen that negative sentiment from last week. We've seen the NGX was down on Friday, 98,000, still there, and still see that negative sentiment persisting at intraday. We hope there's a turnaround before the close of business. And now South Africa, however, the outlier there was up 0.32% at intraday. We also have Egypt's EGX down at intraday 0.53%. Meanwhile, we also see Kenya's closing Friday's session in the red, 1.28% down to close last week's session, but we hope that for the major markets in Africa, we see that turnaround. But let's drill down on activities impacting intraday trading at the NGX. And we have Onose Asotie Inaolo, is investment analyst, Main Street Capital. Good afternoon, Onose. Onose, numbers are not looking good. They're looking dim, quite dim at intraday, especially when I think about what happened last week. Sentiment report for last week showed there was a 98% sell and 2% buy on the NGX. And this sentiment appears to be playing out again at the start of the week. What do you see, Onose? What's driving sentiment at intraday?
Hi, Will. Morning. So if you look at the volume and the value data, it's mostly banks, big banks, Zenith Bank, UBA leading them, Zenith Bank, and then UCAP. So mainly banking and financial stocks. Now, for a company like UCAP, it's expected. UCAP has done really high numbers. As our last week was trading at an all-time high. So usually things that go up usually has to come down because investors want to take profits. But for banks, what we are seeing now is banks were driven. We saw a positive uptick in banks, one because of positive earnings for last year, and that thing is the recapitalization efforts. But last week, Monetary Policy Committee raised the monetary policy rate by 50 basis points, and then you see that we saw that play out even in the bond auction and the NTB auction last week, where we saw rates rise, across all the issues for both securities. So now we might be going into on one end, we might be going into a scenario where bonds and T-bills may begin to become a bit more attractive, because for the last couple of primary auctions, we've seen dwindling demand, but we might be getting to a space where bonds are beginning to become even more attractive. And then we have, with NPR rising up, we have the borrowing rates going up. And I read a report last week that a lot of market players, a lot of companies are beginning to look elsewhere for their borrowing or their lending requirements, because because of the rising NPR, that of banks are really high. So you have that, those two happening, on one end, rising interest rates. On another end, even though interest rates are rising, and we might expect that banks, interest income will increase. When we start hearing things of firms looking outside the banking system for their lending requirements, that might be a little dicey. And then with the Senate or with the presidency wanting to take about 70% of banks' foreign exchange earnings, that's not really going to be really great for their balance sheets, and investors might now start to reevaluate previous valuations based on some of these new variables in the market.
Okay.
And then we now see that some of that play out.
Honestly, I know that we did talk earlier about this protest, this planned protest, the hardship protest. It's a big one looming. How much impact, could you just tell us very quickly, this proposed hardship might have on the markets? I know you did say that there might not be a significant impact, but can you just tell us what we might see if this degenerates into violence?
Well, if this generates, the first thing we might see is insurance companies. Insurance companies might be burdened, because if there's loss of destruction of property, there's a good chance that a lot of that property, especially if it's owned by private companies, will be insured, which is what happened even around June, August. 4 years ago, we had insurance companies having to shell out millions and billions, in coverage for this property. So we have the very first thing, or the easiest, the low-hanging fruit is insurance companies, might have to, their expenses will definitely go up if this degenerates. If this also degenerates to the point where there has to be some sort of lockdown or stay-at-home order, then that might impact some manufacturing companies, and depending on how long that will, we might have, a disruption that might, affect a couple of days of operations. So then I guess it really just depends on how bad it gets, which is why we just hope, for even lives and finances, that it really just goes, peacefully as planned.
Okay, thank you so much, Nonse Asotey and Naulo, for that insight. We'll do keep an eye and keep a track. I mean, we'll be following the developments and we'll be covering what happens in the protest, and we'll definitely keep our audience updated. Thank you so much, Nonse Asotey and Naulo, investment analyst, Main Street Capital, for sharing your insights with us. We'll keep track. Thank you. So, Ini, just looking at hearing what he said, talking about the insurance companies being the one that, especially for the violence, we see insurance companies trying to pay back. Those are the hits that the market is going to have. That's much money, so it may have, because it's not. It's important. We just pray that it doesn't get to that. It doesn't get to that. We just hope that the government actually listens. That's what we need. Listen and do. That's it. Nah.
All right, Will. I'm sure they hear you. All right, now let's still stick on that issue of the protests. As we said, it's the biggest news in Nigeria at this time. And over the weekend, we did see the Chief Executive Officer of CPP share what he has summed up as the cost of that protest. I'm sure he would also be able to tell us the cost of no protests. As we know that a lot of Nigerians are getting desperate because of the high cost of living. We have joining us Dr. Muda Yusuf now. Dr. Yusuf, good afternoon. So I know you did share this in your release earlier about the cost, economic cost of the proposed protest, if it happens.
Yes, the cost will be very, very significant. We are talking about an estimated cost of about 400 billion naira per day. Based on the computations and estimations we did within the context of the GDP numbers. The average daily GDP for the country as we speak is about 660 billion naira per day. So we have discounted for possibilities of some sectors and some locations, particularly the rural areas, not being significantly impacted by the protest. That is how we arrived at the 400 billion. It's an estimate anyway. But the important thing is that it's going to lead, if it is not properly managed, I'm talking of the protest now, it's going to lead to major disruptions of economic activities across all major sectors of the economy. And the impact from that on the economy, on the citizens, on incomes, on jobs will be very, very severe. Already there's a lot of panic, a lot of anxiety, a lot of conferences, business meetings, workshops are now being postponed as a result of the uncertainty that has been created.
All right, Dr. Yusuf, but let's look at the other side of the divide, which is if there's no protest, we do know, I mean, you and I, we've talked a whole lot about the macroeconomic indices, what it's doing to purchasing power, issue of inflation and all of that. And so I guess the protest is just a way of the people trying to get the attention of the people. If there were no protest and then the people continue this way, is there a cost to that?
No, the worry is not about protest. The worry is about how peaceful the protest will be. It is when the protest turns violent, that is when we will have this kind of damage to the economy. This is a peaceful protest. That is fine. It's a way of communicating the feelings of the people to government. Of course, there have been a lot of communications earlier, but this may further accentuate the concerns of the citizens by way of communicating to the government. So the protest itself has its own value. But the worry is that the protest should be managed in a way that it does not degenerate to violence. And the good news is that even the Inspector General of Police has recognized and acknowledged the fact that citizens have a right to protest. But the police has said that it's willing to cooperate with the organizers of the protest to ensure that there is no violence and there is no issues of causing a very disorderly environment, looting, stealing, maiming, and all of that. Because it's very easy for the hoodlums and miscreants to infiltrate this, to take advantage of this, to begin to, perpetuate mayhem, looting properties, breaking into shops. I mean, we saw what happened during the ESAS. Nobody ever prayed that that kind of thing should happen anymore. The protest got completely out of the hands of those who organized it. Shops were looted. You know, a lot of public assets were burnt, were vandalized. 80 BRT buses were burnt. I mean, what has that got to do with police brutality? Certainly nothing. So these are activities of miscreants. That is what the government, and that's what even all of us wish that should not repeat itself. The protest itself is not a bad idea at all.
All right, Dr. Yusuf, we have, it's Thursday, it's supposed to be on Thursday, which is the first day in the month of August. How do you see this being averted? Perhaps if it was managed in one way or the other, it could be averted, and both the government and the people would, as the government has been asking for, they'll get more time, you know, to work and let the people see.
No, I think the best thing to do at this time, I don't think it will be easy to reverse the process. The best thing to do at this time is to engage the organizers, and the organizers will also show up. Because it's not a good thing that we have a protest that doesn't have leadership. It can easily snowball into a major crisis, which will not do anybody any good. So if the organizers show up, they are desperate to hold this rally, and also the sentiments around people have been complaining and all of that. There is hunger, high cost of living. Of course, what is important is to ensure that we make it as peaceful as possible. That should be our primary concern at this time. And as we make it as short as possible, it should not be more than 1 day. Because when protests get prolonged, the risk of it degenerating into violence, into anarchy, into looting, into all manner of criminal activities increases. That is the danger of a protest that is prolonged.
All right, Dr.
It should be kept very short. And of course, that does not even diminish the messaging of the protest. It doesn't diminish it in any way.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Yusuf, for sharing your time and thoughts with us this afternoon. We appreciate it. Chief Executive Officer of Center for Promotion
Thank you very much.
Private Enterprises, Dr. Muda Yusuf, right there. And of course, what we do hope is while the people are free to express themselves, we also have to think about what a protest gone violent can do to the economy, which will affect everyone at the end of the day. All right, it's a continuous conversation right here on Channels Television, so you want to stay tuned. But now let's head to London and see what's happening there. Also, the Finance Minister, Rachel Reeves, is giving an assessment. I wonder if she's done it by now. We saw that story earlier in the day, and she's supposed to give a public finance, the country's public finance, the state of the public finance, ahead of a forthcoming budget. I wonder if she's done that. But we have Juliana joining us to tell us more about this. Hi, Juliana. I wonder if that meeting has held the assessment.
Good afternoon, Illy. Not just yet. Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, is due to deliver her speech to all MPs in the Palace of Westminster at about 3:30 local time. I think we're running on the same timeline at the moment, so that's going to take place in a couple of hours. Very interesting set of circumstances, of course, very different to what's happening in Nigeria, but quite similar because, of course, I think any newly elected administration is very much aware that campaigning on amazing promises is very, very different from governing. And this is likely to be the Labour government led by Sir Keir Starmer's first major headwind, which is the economy, right? That was the key battleground alongside immigration during the election. Lots of promises were made, particularly in terms of accusations, accusing the Conservative government of austerity measures that have led to the potential collapse of the NHS. So we were expecting there to be an influx and an injection of funding, particularly around infrastructure, housing, and schools, but alas, Rachel Reeves, the first female chancellor in this country, has gone through the accounts, and apparently there is a £20 billion deficit, basically a black hole. So the money isn't there. Again, like I said, I know this is similar to most administrations around the world at the moment, but this is going to be a big headache because, of course, there has to be fiscal discipline. You can't just promise that you're going to change everything and inject finances if the money isn't there, and potentially that is what's happened during the campaign. Sir Keir Starmer telling the general public that they were going to lift millions of people out of poverty and trickle down some of that money that's locked up in Westminster in the southeast to the rest of the country, but they may not be able to do that. So we've got to wait until 3:30. As I said, that's just less than 2 hours' time, and we're going to see exactly what has gone wrong under Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and the former Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, who was actually brought in to be a safe pair of hands. He was brought in after Trussonomics went so desperately wrong. So we need to see what has gone wrong. Rachel Reeves is going to spell that out, but this is obviously very important for Britain's future. We're not expecting a budget until October. What is that budget going to look like? Is she going to have to instill levels of austerity that we saw with the Conservative government? Only time will tell, but I'll keep you updated in the morning, Inni.
Yeah, sure. We'll do that after that announcement by 3:30. But what are investors doing at this time?
Investors tip-top condition in terms of the blue chip index at intraday. Oil prices, oil majors leading the UK blue chip index. I think oil's down about 7% last week, but there has been some upticks this morning which have helped lift the FTSE from negative territory. Also Every, which is a parcel delivery firm, kind of rivals Royal Mail, they've just announced this morning that they are going to be hiring 9,000 people. Really good time to get a job in the UK at the moment. Vacancies just under 1 million, but that's a huge announcement, and that's boosted the index at intraday because the all share is up. It's up by 0.88%. FTSE 100 up by 0.94%, and the FTSE 250, the domestic market, that's up by 0.36%. In the currencies market, the British pound currently trading down against the US dollar, down by 0.26%, down against the Euro 2 by 0.10%, and down against the Japanese yen by 0.52% at intraday, Inni.
Thank you so much, Juliana. Talk to you tomorrow.
Thanks, Inni. Talk to you tomorrow. Thanks.
Yeah, so we're still in the market, but now we head to Berlin with Cassandra Son. So, Cassandra, what are investors doing in the EU at this time?
Right. Staying with clean tech for just a moment, it looks like hesitation among shareholders is also taking effect. In the last 2 weeks, the Renix index, which tracks the world's 30 biggest renewable firms, is underperforming compared to global stocks. But elsewhere, Europe's main markets rose at the start of trading today. Actually, the London FTSE 100 gained 0.5 point, boosted by energy shares and investor optimism around a potential rate cut in the U.S. In particular, energy shares were up 1.5% as oil prices rose on fears of a widening conflict in the Middle East. Shell and BP each gained over 1%. In the Eurozone, the Paris CAC 40 was up 0.1 point, while the Frankfurt DAX won 0.5 point.
All right, Cassandra, thank you so much for that. Now let's head to Africa, see what's going on there. We're starting from Ethiopia, where that country has now allowed its currency to trade freely in a bid to unshackle Eastern Africa's largest economy and lure investors and ties lenders, including the International Monetary Fund, to provide a new financing program. Well, the National Bank of Ethiopia permitted banks to buy and sell foreign currency at freely negotiated rates. That's according to a directive on their website. It's important to note that the International Monetary Fund's Executive Board of Directors is scheduled to meet this week in Ethiopia. In fact, today, over Ethiopia's request for a new fund-supported program. So this is obviously one of the requirements for them to be able to access that loan. And in Kenya, the National Treasury has reopened 2 infrastructural bonds for its August 2024 issuance, looking to get back on track in its 2024-2025 domestic borrowing program following undersubscription that was seen in July's bond sale. The state is seeking a total of 50 billion shillings from the 17-year IFB, and that's its first floated in March last year, and then a 6.5-year IFB that was first floated in November 2023. Infrastructure bonds have traditionally received higher investor interest compared to ordinary bonds due to their tax-free status, which remains in place after the cancellation of the Finance Bill 2024, which was proposing to introduce a 5% withholding tax on securities. Everyone is talking now and the opportunities for small businesses, big businesses, individuals, and that's why we're discussing now with the Chief Executive Officer of Green Exchange, the Green Exchange. Ola Enright joins us now from London to tell us some of the opportunities that you may even be able to tap into. It's called photovoltaic battery technology, the potentials in it. Maybe you should help us explain this and say it out for us to understand and see some of the opportunities that are inherent in this. Ola, I would like to hear that first. Good afternoon.
Absolutely. Thank you. Good afternoon. So, as we know, Nigeria is, of course, able to receive a lot of sunlight. So, a source of energy that is becoming far more popular in the last few years has been solar energy. But unfortunately, the sun does not shine all day and all night. What PV enables is for the trapped energy that is generated by solar to be utilized when there is not even sunlight. So it can be used during the nighttime or even in periods where there is no sunlight. It's becoming increasingly popular, and we are forecasting it to be a great topic of discussion in the next year at COP29, where we'll discuss getting investment into PV to grow solar energy and how we can use it in more rural areas where you may not have access to traditional forms of energy. PV will provide an excellent opportunity there.
Yeah, but I mean, most of these things are so capital intensive. When you talk about solar energy, I mean, even some of the big companies run away from it because of how expensive it is, the initial cost of it. So how does this drill down? You mentioned the rural areas. How can they tap into it, looking at the capital that is involved?
Absolutely. So what we're hoping we're going to see is the development fund stepping up to really take advantage of what a great development PV is. So if we can get financing from the Dutch, the British development funds, and even AFDB, into installing PV in more rural areas in Nigeria, I think that is going to be an excellent development, because as you mentioned, it is an expensive form of energy to get up and running, but when it is in operation, it's a very strong source. So hopefully the development funds are going to step up and recognize the development of PV and how effective it can be.
So, but how is this different from what we have already? Already in households, a lot of households now, they do have alternative source of energy, and it's mostly solar. So you have companies that, provide the solar panel, the batteries, and they help set up in homes. How's that different from this?
Yeah, so what PV does is it just essentially stores the energy from the sunlight when you're not even getting any sun. So instead of having to just use solar energy when you're getting sunlight during the day from the hours of sunrise to sunset, you'll be able to access the solar energy during night. So the energy that is being stored from the solar can be accessed when there's not even sun. That is why this is such a fantastic development, because it gives you 24-hour access to the energy that solar creates.
But
I hope that adds more clarity.
Yeah, but isn't that the same thing as now people do use, I think mostly lithium, or lithium batteries to store power? So during the day there's sun, it's captured in there, and at night it can be used. Isn't that the same?
So lithium it's cleaner, of course, it's electric mobility, but it is still mined. Lithium is a mineral that we're mining from the ground, in opposed to solar, which is utilizing just the sun. So it's a far more cleaner form of energy than using lithium. So that's why PV is going to provide such excellent opportunities.
All right, we'll see how that goes in Nigeria, and because as you noted, it's really capital intensive, but I mean, we do need electricity for economic activities and, you know, for recreation and all of that. But thank you so much for your time, Ola Enright, the Chief Executive Officer of the Green Exchange, for your time this afternoon.
Thank you.
All right, let's see if the cryptocurrency space is using solar for their mining, and that will make it cleaner, more attractive.
Wow. Well, definitely we've heard a lot of talk.
I know you guys do talk a whole lot about, you know, the source of mining, which is sometimes so expensive.
Yes, yes.
Some countries are working against it, but I guess that's not the topic for today.
Yeah, that's not the topic for today.
I see you're looking happy with your Bitcoin price.
Yeah, Bitcoin is looking pretty good.
I haven't seen this in a while.
Post-Trump, we saw
when we had that conversation on Friday, we're really expecting that something will happen, because we know there's no way Trump will talk for 30 minutes on cryptocurrency, specifically Bitcoin, and nothing will happen.
Yeah, so we're already seeing the impact. This time we see it's mostly green on the screen. Bitcoin up about 2.44% this afternoon, but we see pockets of red at this time, but not really major altcoins. But let's look at the headlines. Right now we see a Satoshi era Bitcoin wallet got reactivated. That wallet was dormant for a while. It got activated, and they valued that wallet at over $500 billion at this point, and it could actually go as high as 15,000% if whoever owns that wallet, you know, decides to sell at this point, because we know Satoshi, when he created Bitcoin, we got some people that actually, you know, keyed into Bitcoin that time, and they've held their coins for that long. But we see Justice Sun also urging China on their crypto stance at this point, with the rising prominence of cryptocurrency due to the U.S. Upcoming presidential election. We're seeing the likes of Donald Trump, you know, talking about Bitcoin. So Justice Sun is saying China should replicate the same thing at this time. All right, on the final day of the Bitcoin conference, we see former Republican President Donald Trump did talk about, he said a lot of things about Bitcoin, talking about actually firing the current SEC chair if he actually becomes president. Trump had a lot of things to say. That was over the weekend. Let's bring in Gilbert Jopata now, financial market analyst, to bring us up to speed. Hello, Gilbert.
Yeah, greetings, Mr. Ladi. Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon. So, yeah, it seems Trump is serious about Bitcoin, going by what he said at the Bitcoin conference over the weekend. How is the crypto community seeing this? I could hear a lot of shouts of joy at that conference.
The thing is, this software or this monetary system has come a long way from retail enthusiasts, you know, adopting it, towards having institutional investors. And now we are getting into a level where we are seeing governance and good regulatory playground coming in. So President Trump being available for the Bitcoin conference and promising, I think one of the major things he promised was a national strategic reserve for Bitcoin. I think it's a big deal. Not just for the cryptocurrency market, you know, as an industry, but I also think for the development process of these assets and America in particular, because it's a big deal, because we have seen smaller countries like El Salvador getting in, you know, with mining, Argentina as well, but we've not seen a big country like the United States, you know, stepping in. And so Donald Trump, if he fulfilling his promise, that is if he gets to become president of America. And, you know, it's not necessarily that Bitcoin is going to replace the dollar, but this is like having the decision and acknowledging that Bitcoin is a disruptive, you know, asset class, as well as acknowledging the technology that backs it, understanding that Bitcoin is scarce, and also consider, look, let's have this in our balance sheet. I think that this is a right step for any country out there, especially a big country like the United States of America, knowing that Bitcoin is a digital property and acknowledging the democracy that runs it. To me, I think Bitcoin is the United States in monetary codes, you know, where the democracy has the legislator, it has the president, and also have the lawmakers. In Bitcoin, we have node developers and miners. And it is actually, if you ask me, is the United States put on monetary policy running on quotes. And I think that we are going to have more countries acknowledge it and also embrace it on the long term. And this is quite huge, not just for the community or the industrial development. I think for any country, the United States in particular, deciding to adopt Bitcoin or putting it on its balance sheets.
Right, and definitely we've had a couple of personalities, big personalities in the U.S., talk about Bitcoin. We've had the likes of Elon Musk and the other ones, that don't really move the markets anymore when they speak. But do you think former President Trump is going to become the next Bitcoin shiller? And do you think he will still shill Bitcoin if he gets the presidency?
Okay, the thing is, we have seen not just in Bitcoin, whenever the United States president, he wants to speak, the words he uses about any asset class can actually push prices of the assets up or down. But I think that if he gets into being president, and he's somebody who supports this asset class. It's just like when he was president, when it comes to real estate, his stance in real estate. I think it's the same confidence he's going to give to global players and investors if they understand that the president of the United States of America loves and understands Bitcoin as an asset class. I think he's going to give large confidence to investors, knowing that regulatory policies and monetary policies that will come into play will more have favor on Bitcoin rather than the other way around.
And we're seeing Bitcoin showing some signs of revival at this point. Do you see Bitcoin actually outperforming this week?
Yeah, well, we had this conversation, that was Monday last week. I'm still holding my same stance. Bitcoin carried a build up, from I think about a week and a couple of days, and that build up was meant to take us to our resistance level. I understand that there are a lot of bullish stance there in the marketplace, but I am snake bite careful technically because as we have moved into the resistance level, Bitcoin is forming a descending channel. So I think that there is a probability of outcome that Bitcoin is going to bounce off from the resistance level than a breakout. But regardless, we'll watch the market, but I'm snake bite careful that once we get more into this resistance level, breakout is less of a possibility, even though I'm not taking that out. It can happen, but I think that the descending channel we have technically is a point of carefulness that investors should be aware of.
All right, thank you so much, Gilbert Chipata. Always great having your perspective. Thank you.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
Right, so Annie, there you have it. It looks like Bitcoin is playing a prominent role in the U.S. elections. Who knows what's going to happen next? Maybe the Bitcoin community might actually back Trump, at this point, because they're really happy, at that conference.
Yes, it looks like, but I mean, if they can back him to victory, that's another conversation.
That's another one.
All right, thank you so much, Laddie.
Thank you.
So that's it on the program today. Thank you so much for being a part of Business Incorporated. A fresh episode comes your way tomorrow. And, we'll only give you relevant and current conversations right here. So I'll see you tomorrow. Oh, first, I'll see you tonight, the stock market report. See how the market does today.